Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. The last Shabbos of 2000 Chai, right? So, but you guys are so dialed into the Jewish month system, you don't even notice. You don't even know, right? All right, that's fine. That's fine. All right, so we are beginning now the book of Exodus. So the Torah portion in English is called Exodus. In Hebrew, it's called Shemot, the names. And the second triennial cycle begins with the third chapter, which is the scene of the burning bush. So at the burning bush, there is a conversation. There's a conversation between God and Moses. And it's a conversation that we'd like to try to understand. It's very, like most things in the Torah, very succinct. You don't get the full flavor. You know, you don't get the small talk in the Torah. You know, the Torah, they get right to the heart of the conversation. I mean, occasionally there's like, where are you? Okay, here I am. You know, occasionally. But usually, you know, there's not the, you know, how's it going?
What's new?
Right. Well, yeah, how's the weather?
How's the sheep doing?
You know, the annoying things that people say to each other in the elevator, or you know, so that they, when you can't stand the silence, you don't have that part. You have right to the heart of it. And so when you get to the heart of the conversation, could you imagine how long the Torah would be? If, we'd be talking about the weather every 2 seconds. But when you get to the... By the way, yeah, some of this is amusing. I mean, I don't know why you don't think that's funny. But when you get to the conversation and it's very succinct, you could easily gloss over it and not grab the theological importance of what just happened. So the conversation is very short, but it's a very deep and meaningful conversation. So today we want to try and understand the conversation that happened at the outset of the meeting at the burning bush, which is the beginning of chapter 3 of Exodus. Okay? So that's where the triennial cycle begins, still triennial B. Exodus chapter 3, verse 1. Which, page 21 in the Saperstein.
398.
398 in the Platt.
350.
Or 350. If you're limited to the Platt, then it's 350. So. All right, everyone have chapter 3, verse 1? Everyone have the sheets going around? We only made 50 today. We usually make 80. But we were trying to save paper. And I think it worked. Okay. Yeah. There are a few around. If anybody need, we have extra. No? Okay. All right, here we go, Norm. Chapter 3, verse 1.
Now Moses, tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, drove the flock onto the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. An angel of the Eternal appeared to him in a blazing fire out of a bush. He gazed, and there was the bush all aflame, yet the bush was not consumed.
You know, this is a moment that my father-in-law once had. You know, you're Moses. You come out, you marry someone who is not Jewish. Tzipporah, right? She converted. How do we know that? We just found out. What's her dad do for a living? He's clergy. He's clergy before parsonage. Right? So he was clergy, and he's not Jewish. So Moses says to him, you know, imagine Moses coming back to Egypt, see his mother, sister. So I got married. Who'd you get married to? Well, she's not Jewish. She's converted, but she's not Jewish. What's her father do? He's a priest. So, you know, when my wife told my in-laws, who never met a Jew before in their life, he's Jewish. All right, but what does he do for a living? Was he? Priest. Right. He's a what? Right. So So that happened to me. Okay, all right.
Moses said, I must turn aside to look at this marvelous sight. Why doesn't the bush burn up? When the Eternal saw that he had turned aside to look, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. He answered, Here I am. And God said, Do not come closer. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you stand is holy ground. He continued, I am the God of your father's house, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God.
All right. I told you the joke about President Bush and Moses last year, right?
We forgot.
You're supposed to just say the punchline so we can go on. You know when George Bush W. met Moses in the airport? Can I tell you the story? Anyway, this is a true story. George Bush, it's a true story. When he was president, he was in the airport in Houston, and he saw Moses walk by. And he said, Moses, Moses, but Moses just kept walking. Rude. So he said to his one of his Secret Service agents, go ask that guy if he's Moses. So Secret Service guy runs down, excuse me, are you Moses? He said, yeah, I'm Moses. He said, don't you realize the President of the United States calling you? You can't say hello. He said, yeah, I know who he is, but the last time I spoke to a bush, I ended up wandering in the desert for 40 years. All right.
Imagine if he thinks we're a problem.
So, I'll have it for you again next year, this week. I think that's the fourth time I've told you that one. But, all right, now, so we've set the stage for the burning bush. We've set the stage for the burning bush. There are a couple more sentences here, a couple more verses, in which we find out, now, there's a lot going on in verses 7 to 10. Verses 7 to 10 is a whole different class. Right? That's not today's class. I'm interested today in the conversation that begins in verse 11. Okay? So, don't get caught up. Verse 7 through 10 are hard. They're difficult. So let's just skip it. Right? Yeah. No, but I really want to focus on the conversation that begins in verse 11. But before we do that, let's at least see what it says. Verse 7. Edith.
And Adonai continued, I have marked well the plight of my people in Egypt and have heeded their outcry because of their taskmasters. Yet I am mindful of their suffering. I have come down to rescue them from the Egyptians and to bring them out of the land to a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the region of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Now the cry of the Israelites has reached me. Moreover, I have seen how the Egyptians oppressed them. Come, therefore, I will send you to Pharaoh, and you shall free my people, the Israelites, from Egypt.
Okay, so there's a lot going on here, not the least of which is God understanding our pain. So they're slaves now for over 200 years. And God says, I just noticed.
I'm busy.
And so there's a question of, well, what do you mean you just noticed? What about the last 200 years? Is it possible then for for us to be suffering and God not to be so aware? Because only now He's noticed. So this is a whole different class. I don't really want to go into that so much because I'm interested now in the conversation between the two of them. So, between God and Moses. So, by the way, the other issue is, so I'm going to take you to this other land. The other land sounds a little crowded, right? I mean, look how how would history have been changed if God would have said, you know what, I got a beautiful land for you. It's called Hawaii. And the king, Maloki Lucky, is very nice. He's very nice, much nicer than the people you're going to meet there eventually. Right? But that's not what it was. He's taking it to... So the Jews might have said, it's not so good in Egypt. But it doesn't sound so good there either. I mean, there are a lot of people there who probably don't want us there.
Hasn't changed.
Right? Right? So there are a lot of problems there. But what you say is, okay, if God said it, then it must be. So the human side of it comes now from Moses' reaction, okay, which is really beginning now in, let's just reframe it from verse 10. So can you read verses 10 through 12?
Come therefore, I will send you to Pharaoh, and you shall free my people, the Israelites, from Egypt. But Moses said to God, who is
Okay, so verse 10, sorry. Verse 10, God is telling Moses to do two things. What are the two things? Right, good. Most people miss that. So, not just take my people out of Egypt, but also I'm sending you right to Pharaoh. So, you have to have connections to be able to just go to Pharaoh. Right? So, I had a friend who went to England over the break a few days ago. So I said, say hi to the Queen. I texted him, say hi to the Queen for me. He wrote back, she's the one who's showing us to our room. So, well, you forget this is Beth Am. People actually do have those connections. But like in a normal world, you say, all right, I'm going to meet you. You don't just walk in and see the Queen. Go to Egypt. There's a big castle. Walk in, take a left, tell them you're here for Pharaoh, and you have some things to say.
There's a big sign.
Don't remind them that the last time you left,
Welcome back.
they wanted to kill you. Right? Didn't you just get run out of there? Right? Okay, so it's a strange thing to say. Just Moses' first reaction is, how do you think that's going to work? Right? And if you think about what it was like to go see a king in the ancient Near East, Esther was afraid that she might get killed for going to see the king when she was married to him. Right? So it's not so easy to just walk in. Right? Oh, and while you're there, there are about 1 million Jews there. Take them out.
Tell Pharaoh you take
Right.
all your slaves.
So go see the king. Tell him, your free workforce?
Go on.
They're coming with me. So, all right, that's, by the way, you're talking to a burning bush while this is happening. I mean, this is an unusual scene. This is not, right? It's an unusual scene. So, you can almost understand now verse 11 when Moses then replies, huh? Are you kidding?
Why me?
It doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, here's Moses. Doesn't really have a great connection with God. I mean, he's out. He just got married. He has some kids. He's working as a shepherd. He left Egypt behind. He's mostly concerned about sheep. And what does God say? I need you to be concerned about my sheep. Right? You see, you're a different kind of shepherd now. You see that? But Moses doesn't make that connection. He sees a burning bush. And God says out of nowhere, all right, go do this and bring all these people out in front of the king. And by the way, take them to a place where nobody wants them either. So it's a lot to swallow. Now, with all of that preface, let's look closely at verse 11. Right. Aaron, would you mind? Right.
Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and free the Israelites from Egypt? And he said, I will be with you, shall be your sign that it was I who sent you. And when you have freed the people from Egypt, you shall worship God at this mountain.
Okay. Now, is verse 13, when Moses is talking to God in verse 13, is he being sarcastic or is he being serious? So let's look at verse 13, Aaron.
Moses said to God, when I come to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them?
Right, so, all right. I'm here. You're coming with me.
Right.
Oh, really? That's what I'm going to do. And when they say, who sent you? What am I supposed to tell them? I mean, is Moses saying this seriously, or is he saying it sort of
Sarcastically.
a bit of sorry? Now, Moses, from what we know of him in the Torah, is not known for his sense of humor. Right? He's not, this is not the Borscht Belt. Right? He's not a funny guy. Right? He never jokes around. He's serious. This is the law. I mean, it's not that he's not compassionate. He is, but he doesn't, I mean, it's not like a lot of people joke around in the Torah. You know, we had some fun with Bilam at one point. But Moses is a very serious person. So he's probably not being sarcastic, but you could understand if he was, because it's such a crazy thing. But let's just say that he's not being sarcastic and then he's being serious in verse 13. Okay, so fine. Then what it sounds like is, okay, I'll go do it. And I'll go and I'll confront Pharaoh and I'll take the Jews out. But the Jews are going to say to me, who are you? What should I tell them? Okay, fine. If Moses really believes that, then what happened in verse 12 that convinced him in verse 11 to get to verse 13? Right, let me say that one more time. Moses hears this ridiculous thing. You're going to go to Egypt and bring out the Jews, and you're going to go directly to the king. Moses thinking, how the heck am I going to do that? Oh, you're worried about that? Don't worry, I'll be with you. I'll be with you. Verse 12, right? I'll be with you. And there'll be the sign. So somewhere in verse 12, Moses says, okay, I'm convinced. I'm convinced. Because then if 13 is not sarcastic, he says, all right, when I get there, they're going to ask me who you are. What do I tell them? In other words, verse 13, I'm in, I'm going. I'm in. Does everyone see that so far?
I rephrase it. Verse 12 to me is very problematic because it says, and this shall be a token unto thee. This is the sign. And the sign is when you finally get out, you're going to worship me at this place. You know, that sign is not right now, it's a future sign.
That's right. That's right.
So that's very problematic. So I couldn't understand why I would be convinced by that.
Okay, so, very good. Very good. So you need, well, that's why I brought Rashi. Rashi comments on that. Rashi comments. All right, let's look through a couple of Rashis because verse 10, 11, and 12 are not that clear. So verse 10, come now, therefore, I will send thee unto Pharaoh. Thee means you. It's Aramaic. All right. And if you ask, what will this avail? And bring forth my people, your words, Rashi says, will prove effective and you will bring them forth from there. So in other words, he said, I'm going to send you to Pharaoh. And Moses says, Pharaoh doesn't like me. Remember? And God says, no, you're gonna be successful. I'm telling you now, you're going to be successful. So then Moses says, verse 11, Moses responds to both of God's demands, right? There are two demands, right? We said them, go to Pharaoh, take out the Jews. In verse 11, Moses replies to both. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? So look what Rashi says on the answer to the first one. Of what importance am I that I should speak with monarchs? So, according to Rashi, Moses does have the normal response, right? You know, it's like, I'm going to Israel. Say hi to Netanyahu. Well, you know, I mean, I do meet with Netanyahu, but, but say it was like another rabbi, right? You know, I mean, right, well, I don't want to go that far. But all right. Okay, so that's the first question Moses says is, how am I going to meet with the king? And then Moses responds to the second question. And that I'm going to bring the Jews out? And even if I am of sufficient importance for this, this is Paul's question. How has, although this is chutzpahdik, I think, for Moses, how has Israel merited that a miracle should be wrought for them and that I should bring them forth from Egypt? So, he says, even if I do get to meet Pharaoh, and even if I do make a good argument, doesn't logic dictate that you won't bring them out of Egypt unless they deserve it? And the last time I was there, they're worshiping idols, and they forgot about Torah. And I mean, there's no Torah yet, but they forgot about the Musar, the laws of, the ethics of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and what's been passed down, and the stuff that, et cetera. They don't have that. Right? Yeah.
Doesn't he have this bigger task just convincing the people that they ought to go?
100%. I mean, even once they're out there, they say, let's
go
back.
Yeah, why am I here?
Right. You have to understand what Israel was at that time. The land of Israel was a place where other people lived, other people who don't want you. There's no King David. There's no Israeli breakfast. It's not that great.
And you got to be traveling over the desert to get there.
Right. It's not that great. It's like, when I went on my last trip to Israel, they put us up at the Crown Plaza. It's fine.
Good.
It's fine. But, it's not the King David. And you go down to the Israeli buffet for breakfast, and it's not that good. So you look around and say, am I really in Israel? Food's not that good? All right. But it wasn't like that then. They had milk and honey, but that was it. Okay. So the Midrash says Moses was lactose intolerant. No, I'm just kidding. All right. That would be funny. All right. Tough crowd today. Let's look at verse 12. Verse 12. So he says, by the way, Paul says, what's this sign? They haven't earned it. How am I going to take them out? It doesn't make any sense. So, right, so it doesn't exist yet. It doesn't exist yet. So verse 12, for I shall be with you, and there'll be a sign that I've sent to you. When you take the people out of Egypt, you will, right, future tense, worship God on this mountain, which means you're going to accept the Torah. And because these Jews are going to say Na'aseh v'nishma, because they're going to accept the Torah, eventually they merit to be taken out of Egypt. Okay, that's interesting logic, and I don't know that Moses buys it, but that's what the Torah says. That's verse 12. So look at Rashi. Yeah, sorry.
In the verse where God says, I will be with you and it shall be your sign, is he talking about the fact that he will be with them or the burning bush? It seems to me that there's an existing sign. The burning bush is the sign that it's God who started.
No. I shall be with you. And this... Oh, right. You're right. That is what Rashi says. And this, so here's what Rashi says. And this is the sign for you that I have sent you, means, and this, the vision you have seen at the thorn bush, is the sign that I have sent you, and that you will succeed in my mission. And that but that's a sign to Moses that this is going to work. So, you imagine you show up to Egypt and all the Jews are there. And you've gathered them at, the arena. Right, at the Egypt Airlines arena. And they're all there waiting for you. And I'm going to take you out of Egypt. Okay, great. How do you know that? God told me. He showed me a sign. You're not going to believe this? I saw a bush and it was burning. Oh, he saw a bush. Yeah. What are you talking? Right? This is not a sign he can convey to them. This was a sign for him. At least according to Rashi. Very good. Very good. Okay. So the sign for them is we're not sure yet. We're not sure yet.
I don't know whether they're miracles, but they're so difficult to comprehend for me. And that is Moses having this one-on-one relationship with God. That he accepts this thing that he can't see, can't touch, but only hear.
Okay.
And the second thing is the Israelites listening to Moses as that leader who has a relationship with God. Moses can't talk to Pharaoh because he's not okay in speech. That speech would carry forward to the people. Maybe. This whole concept of Moses hearing and the people believing him that he heard. Because I heard from God and I will tell you, take your points and bet on Oklahoma.
Right. By the way, Moses never speaks to Pharaoh.
Pardon?
Moses never speaks to Pharaoh. It's through Aaron.
But that's what my
Right.
whole issue is. He never speaks to Pharaoh, but he speaks to the people.
Right.
The people believe him.
Correct.
And that is a very difficult thing for me.
Although it takes a while. He's got to do some magic. And at first they say to Moses, "You've made our lives worse. You didn't make it better. You made it worse. Now we have to collect more straw." Right? We're not so sure we're into this at all. It took a while, but then Moses said, "Well, wait do you see what I can do with a snake, and I can do some things with blood, and then, all right. But the 10 plagues. But consider this when we'll deal with this in the next couple of weeks when we get to the plagues. But consider this: the purpose of the 10 plagues. Why do you need 10 different plagues? Because each plague defeats a different Egyptian god. The blood. So, logically, you don't need 10 different plagues. You just go with the blood. The blood was working. They hated the blood. So turn off the blood. We can't take it. We'd rather deal with frog. No, the blood was working. You know what Moses could have said? Let us go or I'll turn the blood back on. The blood was working. But he already defeated the Nile. Now he needed to defeat other gods. So this convinces Pharaoh that there's only one God who controls everything. And it convinces the Egyptians that there's one God who controls everything. There are not lots of different gods. But it also is meant to convince the Jews that there's one God. Because they're not quite there yet either. There's a concept of monolatrism. You ever heard of monolatrism? Monolatrism is the michamocha. Who is like you among the gods? Monolatrism is everyone has a God, but our God's better than all of yours. The belief in one God that's better than all the others. That's monolatrism. Right? And some people think that that's what the Jews were. Until a point. At least until Shema Yisrael. Right? I mean, otherwise, why do you have phrases like Mi Chamocha? Who is like you among the gods? What gods? There are no other gods. Well, maybe they thought there were. This is, I've mentioned to you this before. I mentioned this to you before, but when I was teaching at the University of Miami, and I was forced to look at Torah from a non-traditional perspective, something amazing occurred to me, which is that whenever another country, another nation lost a war in the ancient Near East, they assumed it was because the God of the other nation was stronger than their God. There was only one nation who didn't do that, the Jews. The Jews never said that. The Jews never said, the Babylonians had a better God than we did. The Jews said, our God must be mad at us because we're sinners, and so our God let us lose. But they're the only nation that thought that way. Right? It's an interesting idea. It's a different class. But, all right, so verse 12. Let's look at Rashi on verse 12 in order to fill time. So, but also it's interesting. Laura, would you mind reading? And he said, right in the middle of the page.
And he said, because I will be with thee. He answered his first question first, and his last question last. As regards what thou hast said, who am I that I should go into Pharaoh? Of what importance am I to speak with kings? I replied, it is not an undertaking of yours, but it is partly for mine, for I will be with thee. And this, the sight which thou hast witnessed in the bush, shall be a sign unto thee, because I have sent thee, and I am competent to save, just as thou hast seen the bush carrying out the mission I laid upon it, and it was not consumed. So go thou to on the mission I entrust to thee, and thou shalt suffer no harm. And as regards thy question, what merit have the Israelites that they should go forth from Egypt? I reply that I have great purpose in this, by bringing them forth, for they are destined to accept the Torah upon this mountain at the expiration of 3 months after they leave Egypt.
Okay, so Rashi's just verbatim the Midrash here, but he's trying to make a point that this is a big deal. That this point in the Torah, what is the sign, it's a very big deal. And the big deal is that because of what they're going to do, they deserve to be redeemed right now. And why can you say that? So, in other words, this is like an anachronistic moment. It's not very fair to the Jewish people, while they're slaves, to be judged for what they're thinking, because they're not free. They're not free physically. They're not free spiritually. They're not free emotionally. Everything is controlled. Right? Even what they're thinking is controlled by the taskmasters, by the Egyptians. So once they are free, I'm going to give them 3 months to decompress. Right? Those are the weeks, we call them, right? The time that it's going to take to travel. 3 months. 3 months. I know that seems short. We're going to give them 3 months to travel. And they're going to come to Mount Sinai. And then for the first time as free people, they're going to have a decision. So in other words, God's saying right now, the next time they have a decision, I bet they choose me. Now the next time is not going to be for a while. We're going to have to, because they're not free yet. We need to free them. But the next time they're given a decision, they're going to choose me. So when you go to them right now, they may be a little skeptical because they're not in their right mind. Their minds are being controlled. Their whole existence is being controlled. They don't know what it's like to be free. But they're going to be free. They're going to be given a choice. The choice is, do you want the Torah or not? Every other nation is going to say, no, I don't want the Torah. They're going to get that choice. They're going to say yes. So because of that, they deserve to be given that chance to be taken out now. And Moses says, okay, that I can understand. That makes sense to me. Now, in order to be a great rabbi, you want to know the secret? I'm still trying to figure it out. But in order to be a great rabbi, you need to be able to say the other rabbis are idiots. Right? They have no idea what they're talking about. So look at Rashbam. Now Rashbam, the grandson of Rashi, he would never go against Rashi except when he does go against Rashi. Even at some point, you have to say, even Rashi was wrong. If you're Rashbam. Because you point out everyone else is wrong, so he waited for Rashi to pass away before he came out with this commentary. But here's what he said. Anyone who truly, so this is on verse 11, talking about this oath, this sign. Anyone who truly wants to understand the plain meaning of this sequence will heed my exegesis carefully. My predecessors, here it is, were quite wrong. Right? That's perfect. That's classic Mefarshim. So, you know how you define your Jewish theology? There's like a different idea of where you place yourself. So, your theology is wherever you stand, where you can look to the right and say to you, those people are crazy. And those people are barely Jewish. That's where you are. That's your theology. Right? So you move over here. A few more people are crazy. A few of these people you can tolerate. You move over here. A few of them are less crazy, and a few of them. All right. So that's Jewish theology 101. All right. By the way, that has nothing to do with this. That's just bonus. This is something I've been thinking about. All right. So he says my predecessors were quite wrong. Now remember, there's two requests. First request, go to Pharaoh. Second request, bring out the Jews. According to Rashbam, Moses replied to two things that God requested from him. He'd been asked to go to Pharaoh, and he'd been asked to take the Jewish people out of Egypt at Pharaoh's command. In respect to God's first instruction, he answered, and that I should bring out the children of Israel from Egypt, which is to say, even if I am fitting to go into Pharaoh, I am incompetent for the other things. So the first thing he says is this. Even if I have this lineage where I was raised by Pharaoh's daughter, and you think that I'm fit to see the burning bush, okay, fine. I'll go see Pharaoh. But my problem is, who am I then? What's so great about me that I can be the leader to take the Jewish people out of Egypt? Maybe, so the Rashbam saying is, maybe Moses didn't have such a problem with the first question. His real problem was with the second question. Okay, clear so far? Okay. Which thing would be acceptable to Pharaoh that I should say to him? And is Pharaoh incompetent so as to listen to me and send me free from his land, a large people that are his slaves? Meaning, it's not going to be a great economic decision. By the way, what's Pharaoh's long-term plan? Moses is grown up at this point. Moses is grown up at this point. Are slaves increasing or decreasing? Decreasing. Why? Pharaoh's been drowning all the boys for the last couple decades. Right? Even since Moses, the policy was, Jewish boy is born, you drown him. We're trying to get rid of these Jews. We don't like Jews. We're trying to get rid of them. Remember we didn't read it. But in the very beginning of Exodus, Pharaoh doesn't say we need to enslave the Jews because we need a workforce. So we need to explain them because they're growing too numerous and they might side with our enemies. We don't like these Jews. Remember we talked about this last week, or over the last couple weeks, that the Egyptians didn't like to eat with the Jews, and they're different, and there are a lot of problems. Right? We're still dealing with some of those issues. All right. Okay, so Moses' question, according to the Rashbam, even if I do get a meeting, why would Pharaoh just let the slaves go? I don't understand that. How's that going to work? Okay. And which thing that would be acceptable should I say to him? That through this thing I will bring them out of Egypt with the permission of Pharaoh, meaning, okay, I understand you want me to get into the palace and speak to Pharaoh. And then there's going to be this moment where I'm going to say to Pharaoh, okay, I'm here for the Jews. I'll take them now. And at that point, Pharaoh is going to look at me and say, why in the world would I ever allow that? And at that moment, I'm going to need an answer. God. I'm going to need something. So at that moment, what do I say? I don't think Moses is not saying this sarcastically, but he really wants to know, okay, but what do I say at that moment?
Well, wouldn't that fix Pharaoh's problem? I mean, if he wants to get rid of the Jews and kill them by killing the boys, wouldn't that an irony? Taking the Jews out of Egypt would save Egypt from the Jews. It would have to be more Jews. Why do you have to kill them?
Right, so I think... Look, it's a good question. I know what the Midrash says. That's not so exciting for you, but you have to understand this idea, I think. Pharaoh's afraid of the Jews. He's afraid of them because of a prophecy. The prophecy is that someday one of these Jews is going to rise up and destroy you, which is the reason why, according to the Midrash, Moses has the speech impediment. Everyone know that story? So there's a story. The story is that Pharaoh had 3 advisors, an unbelievable cast of characters. He had 3 advisors. And Batya, his daughter, comes and says, I want to raise this Jewish boy. They know he's Jewish, because who else would be in a wicker basket, and he's circumcised. So, it's funny, I was just reading a story about these heroes of the Warsaw Ghetto, the girls. They would send the girls out to get food, because they could pass for non-Jews better, because they couldn't be checked for circumcision. And so there were these heroes, this group of girls, and they would go out and try to bring food back. I mean, there were boys who went too, but there were a lot of girls who did it. Incredible. So anyway, they knew Moses was Jewish. So Pharaoh says, well, no, we have a policy, you have to kill him. So he goes to his advisors. He has 3 advisors. Bilam, Yitro, and Job. Can you imagine this group? I mean, it's like a dream foursome. Who you're going to play with. People say, who do you want? This group, what a conversation. So, Bilam says, drown him. Kill him. Because someday, a Jewish boy is going to rise and destroy you. And I think it could be this guy. Bilam was right. Bilam was a prophet. Jethro says, now, Jethro has no idea that he's looking at his future son-in-law. But he says, I have an idea. Well, first of all, the third one, Job has no idea and he runs away. He has no idea, he doesn't know what to do, and he runs away. And he ends up suffering. It's an idea. So, right? You Job, we don't know why he suffered. All right. So, Jethro says, if he's a smart boy, kill him. Because maybe he will rise into it. But if he's stupid, let him live. What's the harm? So they bring out candied fruit and hot burning coals. And he said, if he's smart, he'll eat the candy, and then you'll know you'll kill him. The candied fruits. So, Moses, smartest person ever lived, reached for the fruits. Angel takes his hand, puts his hands on the coals, he puts the coals in his mouth, burns his tongue to the point that it's damaged irreparably. So that's the story. Now, you don't have to believe in that story. But here's the idea. If you don't believe in that story, you have to try and figure out then, why does Pharaoh, how do we answer your question? And why does Pharaoh want to drown all the boys? You would think that that's a bad idea because you're killing your workforce. You want them to produce more slaves to work for you. Who wants to kill all their slaves? Nobody. It doesn't make, it's not an economic, doesn't make sense. So why does he want to do it? The only reason is because he had a belief that someday one of these Jews is going to rise up and destroy him. So if you do let them all go, then his greatest fear might come true. What's his greatest fear that he tells us in the beginning of the Exodus? The book. Someday, these Jews might side with our enemies and come and destroy us. That's his fear. Which is a what's the word? Irrational fear. Because there aren't that many Jews. Right? There are only 70 souls that came down to Egypt. There weren't, all of a sudden, there's so many Jews. Now, the Midrash says there was a miracle and a lot of Jews came forward. All right, every time a woman gave birth, 6 of them popped out. So, that's what it says. By the way, that's why there's this tradition of, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but some people put an apple on their Seder plate. Anyone ever seen that?
Yeah.
So have you seen it? Okay, so why do we put the apple on the Seder plate? Because the Jews were forbidden to have relations. Because it's not that they were forbidden, it's just they didn't want to because they knew all the boys would be killed. So the women came up to the men and said, you're worse than Pharaoh. Because he decrees all the boys are being killed, but you won't have relations with us. You're decreeing that the girls won't live either. So they went out into the apple orchards, and the miracle happened that the apples became so thick that the guards couldn't see behind the apples. And that's where they would, it was like the Vegas. It was like, and that's where they would go. And they would have relations, but the apples hid them. So the apples saved the Jewish people. So if you want to put an apple on your Seder plate, have at it. Well, it's up to you. But it's a custom that exists. All right. So I want to focus on one more idea, and with this idea, maybe learn something. So Moses says, okay, according to the Rashbam, Moses says, why should I go and speak to Pharaoh? What could I possibly say to him that it could work? But if you look closely at verse 11, Moses, so I want to read it in Hebrew so I can translate it very specifically. Vayomer Moshe El HaElohim. Moses says to God, Mi Anochi, who am I, ki elech, that I, first person, that ki elech, that I will go to Pharaoh, El Paro, to Pharaoh, v'chi otzi. Otzi is the same word as motzi, right? Motzi, I'll bring out. Otzi with an aleph means I will, that I will bring out. Epnei Israel, the children of Israel, Mitzrayim from Egypt. So he uses the first person singular 3 times. Right? Anochi, I. Elech, I will go. Otzi, I will take out. And so it appears that what Moses is saying is not that I don't think it's right that someone should take the Jews out of Egypt. I just don't know that it should be me. There's something wrong, or there's something not right with my skill set to do this. It's not what I do. It's not what I do. Okay, that's, if you look closely at verse 11, that's what it sounds like. I mean, he says it 3 times. That I will go, that I will take out, and he uses the word anochi, I. Now, what's the first of the 10 commandments in Hebrew? Anochi Hashem. I am Hashem. Anochi. He says Anochi. So here Moses says, Mi Anochi. Am I God? Anochi. It's a word that's used. It doesn't say Mi Ani. Ani means I. But Anochi is the I that it's used in the first commandment. I am the Lord. So Moses is saying, Mi Anochi. Am I the Lord? Do I have the skill set that you have? Now, what's God telling him? God's telling him, you're not going to take the people out of Egypt. You're not even going to get your name in the Haggadah. Right? Moses is not in the Haggadah. I'm going to take the people out of Egypt. You're just my emissary. You're just an emissary. You're not Anochi. But, okay, even besides that, Moses is wondering, I don't even have the skill set to do it. So, there's a midrash that tells us what his skill set is. So because the rabbis are going to have a question about this, about what Moses says, and the rabbi's question is, what is it about Moses that he sees where his strengths and weaknesses are, and he doesn't see that taking the people out is going to be his strength because he's got a weakness? What is it?
Speech.
Oh, speech is one idea. That's a different class. But even deeper, because I'm not talking so much physical, I'm talking more his complete essence of what he represents. So, if you look on the last page of the packet, there's a midrash. Now, I know this is just midrash, but this is not a story. This is just the rabbis interpreting something else in the Torah, in the Tanakh. Actually, one of the Psalms. Okay? So, do you see on the right-hand side, which is page 89? Everyone see that? Okay, so you see in the middle where it says number 10. And he went and met him. Okay? So this is from a little bit later on in Exodus. Our verse is, I want you to go and to meet him. So this verse in the next chapter is, he went and he met him. Right? So remember God's two commands. Go to Egypt, meet with Pharaoh. So, okay, fine. He went and he met him. Clear so far? Okay, so look what the Midrash says. When it says mercy, does everyone know the Hebrew word chesed? Chesed. Chesed can mean kindness. Gmilut, chasadim, right? Chasadim is plural of chesed. But chesed, Michael can tell you in Kabbalah is, what's chesed? No, just the attribute. Very nice. So, right, it's the opposite. One way of looking at it is someone who's too gvura is too judgmental. Someone who's too chesed gets walked over too much. You want to be right in the middle. You want to be able to stand up for yourself, but also have compassion. All right, whatever. But, so when it says mercy and truth met together, righteousness and peace have kissed each other. So, all right, here's how, this is a little class on Midrash. Here's how Midrash works. There's a verse from Exodus, or a phrase from Exodus. And he went and he met him. Okay? Then there's a verse from the Psalms. And the Psalms says that there are two attributes, mercy and truth. And they meet. Now, mercy refers to Aaron, the brother of Moses, of whom it is said, and of Levi he said, etc., etc. While truth refers to Moses, of whom it says, etc., etc. So, what the Midrash is pointing out is something that Moses knows in verse 11. I'm not the compassion guy. That's Aaron. I'm the guy with no sense of humor. Right? I'm truth. I'm justice. I'm the one who says, really? You want me to take Israel out? Do they deserve it? Do they deserve it? Moses is very black and white. Although later on he gets to Gemara, because a lot of gray. But he's very Torah. He's very, this is the law, this is the result. That's him. You want wants to give them a hug, and isn't this horrible, and I feel so terrible for you. That's Aaron. That's not me. That's not for me. You got the wrong guy. I got the wrong skill. Think about the golden calf. Aaron says, all right, they want to build this thing. I don't want them to. I'll stall. I'll do what I can. I'll try to assuage them. I'll try to make peace. But, I won't be too hard on them. Moses comes down. All right, who built it? Kills them. All the ringleaders, kills them. Aaron tried to, so. I mean, that's a different class. But there's a much different, you committed the sin. He kills them. Has them all killed. Right? Okay, so, now, keeping all that in mind, the middle page, the Sfat Emet, 100 years ago. He wrote a lot about this. I only brought a little bit. I had to translate it myself. I didn't have the English. There is no English to the Sfat Emet. Say it again? An abridged, yeah. I have that in my office, but it's not so helpful. All right, so this is my translation. Might be a little rough, but here it is. The essence of Moses, according to Sfat Emet, was that he personified Torah, right? We just said that. He's Torah. All his actions were according to Torah and law. In truth, God wanted the redemption of Israel should be done through Torah. But Moses wanted Torah to be delivered through kindness, which was the characteristic of Aaron. All right. So, what God said was, what Moses said was, not for me, you want Aaron. Because I represent Torah and he represents Chesed, meaning I represent Mishpat, I represent black and white, here's the crime, here's the mitzvah, you either get rewarded or you get punished, and that's it. Aaron's will give you a big hug, and he'll try to make peace, and everything will be wonderful. So God says to Moses, Moses, I see that that's how you view yourself. But when you say you represent Torah, the compassion is built in. And you're going to figure that out too, and I need you to do it. So God understood that, and that's why he sent Moses to do it. But Moses didn't quite get that. But I think there's an idea here. An idea that I've been thinking about for a long time, actually. Just been waiting for the right sources to be able to say it. So here's the idea. And by the way, the last time I taught this, or was telling someone, Paul, I used the story of, who was the doctor? Your grandfather?
Yeah.
That was saved?
No, my father.
Your father. So, the story of Paul's father, Paul told me a story about his father who, maybe you want to say it quickly, what the Rebbe told him about being a doctor and why.
My grandfather took my father to a Hasidic rabbi around the age of 12 to ask him what direction he should go in. And the rabbi told him I wanted him to be a doctor, which was sort of unheard of in those times because they didn't advocate for secular learning. And he said if he wants to be a true Jew who says what he believes, then he will be in any case. But don't let him go become a rabbi because ultimately he's going to preach something he doesn't believe in.
But how did it save him? How did it help him?
Yeah, my father was rounded up during the Holocaust. His whole family was killed, and he was spared because he was a doctor. So he saw the hand of providence in this direction that he received, and he lived a very pious life. Gave away more than he earned on a current basis. 2 weeks, although he was a very successful physician, 2 weeks after he passed away, my mother had to go to work.
Wow. So to me, this story, it's a very powerful story, but the story is that each person has a mission. And Moses defining, Moses was saying, I mean, God didn't agree with him, he said, but Moses was saying, it's not my mission, it's not my skill, it's not what I do. That's Aaron. And even Aaron said, all right, I understand my mission. This is why Aaron's rewarded and he becomes the first priest. Is because he says, I understand my mission. I don't need to be the leader. I'll be Moses. Even though he's the older brother, he gets rewarded for it. So I think what the story is meant to show, and I think the conversation that God had, the conversation at the burning bush, just a couple verses. I mean, there's the whole setup and preamble. But the conversation between God and Moses, just a few verses. But in those few verses, there's a very powerful idea. And I think what the idea is that Moses is pointing out that he has a contribution to make to the Jewish people. And it's a very specific contribution. And that Aaron has a contribution to make to the Jewish people. And it's a very specific contribution. And not just Moses and not just Aaron, but every single Jew has a contribution to make to the Jewish people. And it's a very specific contribution. And I have to tell you, I've been reading article after article. I just wrote my commentator article for next month about it. It was due like 3 weeks ago. I wrote it last night. But it's something I've been thinking about for a while. And that is the shrinking American Jewish landscape and how we're diminishing and not growing. And there are a lot of reasons why. And there's some very painful reasons. And it's almost like watching a train wreck about to happen because we're shrinking. But I think the reason why, it's not so much intermarriage, it's not so much assimilate. These are byproducts. Assimilation. It's not so much lack of spirituality in our society. I don't think it's those things. I think those are the results. I think it is that we don't live in a world where every single Jew is asking themselves, what is it that I contribute to the Jewish people? And I think the question that we try to ask, Rabbi Soloveitchik, alav shalom, when he would give I heard this from a different rabbi, but when he would give a eulogy, and I try to do this too when I give eulogies, but what he'd do is he'd pick one mitzvah that the person did and try to personify it and just, nail it home so that the people there will be inspired to say that was his contribution to the Jewish people. And ask themselves, what's my contribution to the Jewish people? And so the only way to reverse the trend of the shrinking American Jewish landscape is for, they don't have this problem so much in Israel. In Israel, everyone says, I go to the army, I defend the country, that's my role. And even if it's somewhat simplistic, they feel that. They feel that I went to the army, I helped defend the country, I did something for the Jews. Whether they have ever kept a Shabbos in their life, I did something very important for the Jews, and you can't disagree with that. But for us, it's a little different. So the way to reverse the trend, I think, is for every Jew to be able to say, how are the Jewish people a little better off because I was here? Imagine where we would be and what the trend would be compared to what it is now if every Jew could understand the conversation that Moses had with God at the burning bush. The conversation at the burning bush was not go to Egypt and take the Jews out. You don't need a burning bush for that. You don't need the word Anochi for that. God could have just said to Moses, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you. I know it doesn't sound right, but he's going to believe you. There's going to be a thing with the stick, and there's going to be plagues, and then I'm going to split the water, and that's going to be pretty cool, and everyone's going to buy it. Okay. That's not the conversation. The conversation is, I want you to do something because I think this fits you. No, that doesn't fit me. That's not. No, that is your strength. Here's why. I know your brother does this, and you do this, but for this, I need you for this. The whole point of that interaction is to say, in order for the Jewish people to survive, to get out of Egypt, to become free, to get the Torah and to flourish, every Jew is going to have to know what it is they contribute to the Jewish people. And in order to do that, we have to finally get to a point where we're each saying, at the end of their life, not how great did I do for me. Not how wonderful was my life because I got to do this, this, and this, and I enjoyed this, this, and this, and I did. How are the Jewish people better off, even if only a little, because of me?
Sounds like hello.
That's what we're trying to do to reverse the trend, I think.
That's hello.
All right. Shabbat shalom.